Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jerry Bryan, and I'm with the TankSure program. And joining me today is Sean Litchfield. Today we're going to talk about the oil tank dilemma. First off, I know these are unusual circumstances. Our preference would be to be doing this presentation live. However, obviously all that's going on with COVID has dictated otherwise. But this actually might be a better platform for us, as my colleague Sean and I have faces for radio, so consider yourself lucky. So again, today we're going to talk about the oil tank dilemma and how you can utilize marketing and technology to deal with your oil tank issues. I'm going to talk a little bit about some research and development projects that we've done as it pertains to the oil tank. I'm going to talk a little bit about our data, and Sean is going to focus mainly on how you can utilize technology and marketing to handle this oil tank issue. So let's get going. Just some background on our company. We've been inspecting oil tanks for the past 20 years. So the TankSure program is the first and only proactive tank replacement program in the industry. And how it works is we utilize ultrasonic testing technology along with an inspectional process where you can go out and test and inspect your above ground home heating oil tanks. The TankSure program also comes equipped with a warranty that could range anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 towards the proactive replacement of that particular tank. We work with over 400 companies in the Northeast, from Maine to Virginia, as far west as Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We've trained over 4,000 technicians on how to test and inspect above ground home heating oil tanks. And to date, we have inspected close to 800,000 tanks in the industry thus far. We have been responsible for the proactive replacement, so replacing these tanks before they leak, for close to or over 50,000 tanks. So the oil tank is a current concern. It's actually been a concern for as long as I have been in the industry. It is without a doubt the Achilles heel in the industry. I think that's we'll talk a little bit about this later in the presentation, but the natural gas industry likes to focus on the oil tank and likes to utilize that with their customers and trying to convince them to switch to natural gas. And it really is something we as an industry really need to address. And it should, if it's not a concern for you as a marketer, it's something you should really start to think about and consider addressing. Would you put fuel in these tanks? You probably like to think you would not, but the reality is you are, and so are your competitors, and so is everyone in this industry. These tanks are being delivered to on a daily basis. As much as you would like to think they are not, they are. So just a snapshot of our stats. I know I kind of talked about this in the previous slides. We have inspected close to 800,000 tanks. To date, we have been responsible for the funding of over $11 million worth of tank replacements in the industry. We have, as I mentioned before, proactively replaced over 50,000 tanks, and that's 7%. So that's 7% of the tanks that are out there look like the tanks on these slides and the previous slides. And that's a really scary thought. So this is something that really needs to address. And if we do not address this, the consequences could be dire for our industry. So I want to talk about a report that we did a few years back for SEMA. the Connecticut Energy Marketers Association. This was a research and development report, and the report was focused mainly on above ground home heating oil tanks. And Connecticut's kind of a good market for us. It's kind of our bellwether state. We have inspected close to 80,000 tanks in Connecticut. So Connecticut makes up about 10% of our database. And as I mentioned, we have tested, close to 80,000 tanks there. This report, I'm just going to talk about some data points that we've pulled from the report. I'm not going to go through the whole report, but what you'll see there in this particular data point is the age of portfolio. So as you can see, almost 70% of the tanks in Connecticut are less than 20 years of age. And so what does that tell us? That tells us that the homeowners in Connecticut are actually likely to replace their tank when approached by their oil company if the tank needs to be replaced. So I think you are seeing the Connecticut marketers are doing a great job of convincing their homeowners to replace the tank when it's determined that tank needs to be replaced. So that's I think a really good takeaway for us. And Sean will talk a little bit about this later in the presentation, but I think if we can convince the homeowner to replace the tank, the likelihood of them switching to another energy source is really low. And I think so. I think that's something that's very positive. As I mentioned, this is kind of unique. I think we typically see in some of the other markets the age of tanks probably closer to 30 years old or even 40 years old in some cases. So to have over 70% less than 20 is actually again a very good thing. The next data point here is inaccessibility. Again, you can see that number trending downward. And really, what does that tell us? It tells us that the oil companies, the technicians, the CSRs are doing a really good job of communicating to the homeowner that the tanks need to be accessible. And in some cases, they need to be accessible because the oil companies, insurance companies are requiring that these tanks be inspected on a regular basis. So they're doing a good job of telling the homeowner that the tanks need to be inspected on a regular basis, making sure that the motorcycle's not in the way or the Christmas decorations are not in the way. So again, I think that's a very positive thing for us. Percent replaced at first inspection. So what this talks about is of the 9,100 tanks that were indicated that needed to be replaced, almost 66% of those tanks were replaced at time of the inspection. Now, that's not to say that the other 34% were not, but I think it speaks to what I talked about in the previous slide, that the homeowners in Connecticut, when approached, were actually more likely to replace the tank. And I think what typically that worries or there's some trepidation sometimes with the oil companies and having this conversation that they might, that might drive them to switch to another energy source, and that's really not the case here. So I think this data point and the data point and the slide or two back just tells us that it's really a marketing conversation. And Sean will really we'll talk about this in some later slides about how you can have the conversation, how you can communicate to the homeowner when it's determined that tank needs to be replaced. So that's one of the data points there. And then the other thing I just wanted to talk about on the slide is why the oil tank disqualified. So you can see 31% was due to visual inspection, 21% was ultrasonic testing, 18% is patching, and 15% needed a vent or fill upgrade. I want to talk about patching for a second. That's something that's unique to Connecticut. One of the things we found is there were a lot of tanks that were fiberglass patched on the bottom, and that's something you don't really find in some other states. There was a company back in the late 80s, early 90s that would actually go out and fiberglass bottom these tanks, and And so we found a lot of them out there in Connecticut. Over time, that patching wears off, and so that's one of the things that that we found in Connecticut. But again, it's really unique to Connecticut. So again, I think that the big takeaway here, though, is that the homeowners are more apt to replace their tank when approached by their oil company. Cost of replacement, I think this is pretty straightforward. As you can see, from 2012 to 2018, the costs went up. I think the big driver there was the cost of steel. Obviously, the cost of labor has gone up over that time period, but I think the cost of steel, I think was really one of the things that dictated this number. The other thing to keep in mind is that in Connecticut, Southern Connecticut's going to be a lot different than Northern Connecticut as it pertains to the price of an oil tank replacement. But we are seeing it is close to $3,000, at least definitely over $2,500 these days. So that's that slide. The cost of spills, I'm not going to go into talk about the spills in this particular slide, though I will say, obviously the Maine DEP and many DEPs talk about how they spend millions of dollars with regards to oil spill remediation on an annual basis. I want to talk a little bit more about the cause of the failures. As you can see there, it shows you the breakdown with corrosion, accidents, and the other data points there. So these are, there are simple things that we can do, just even as it pertains to, corrosion. We do have our ultrasonic testing device that can detect corrosion going on inside the tank. And you have, with accidents, there are simple things that you could do. If your oil tank is in your garage and you don't have a barricade up, and a car could easily drive and hit that oil tank, you might want to consider putting some barricades up. So there's little things that you can do to address those particular things to avoid those types of accidents. So that's really it as it pertains to the report. If you are interested in this report, you can contact us. We'll send you the full report. It goes into a lot more detail than I just talked about, but thought you'd be interested in those data points. So the oil tank issue is not just a problem in our industry. It's obviously something that stakeholders in our industry are recognizing it to be a problem for them as well. So just wanted to talk about a couple of different scenarios here. In Vermont, the Vermont DEC has recently come up with new tank regulations that the oil dealers in Vermont need to adhere to. And I think it's by August 15th, the Vermont dealers have to have all their oil tanks inspected. And so it seems a little aggressive, but I think it kind of talks to how much of an issue it is for the Vermont DEC, and how serious they recognize it as being a problem. So that's just something to think about. And then I took this from the Maine DEP, and some of the stats that we had talked about in the previous slide was corrosion being a major concern with regards to these failures, and I think it was the number one reason why these failures occurred. They talk about how ultrasonic testing your above ground tank is they go as far as to almost recommend it, but they talk about how it's a effective way to determine the condition of your oil tank. So another group of stakeholders are the realtors and the home inspectors. We're starting to see that the home inspectors are putting oil tank inspections in as part of their standard home inspection. So that's some, so they're starting to recognize it. I mean, we get calls on a regular basis from home inspectors and realtors asking us if we can come out and we typically send one of our oil companies out to do these inspections. But but the oil tank is definitely a sticking point at the sale of the home. So again, so far as that, home inspectors are starting to incorporate it into their home inspection, and now realtors, contacting us or want to partner up with our oil companies as it pertains to doing some type of oil inspection. And then I had mentioned that we do have a warranty program that goes along with it, so that certainly helps them at the time of the home sale. One thing to think about too is a lot of these realtors are encouraged to sell these home warranty programs, and one thing that these home warranty programs, they cover essentially everything in the home, but the one thing they leave off is the oil tank. So again, it has been a useful tool for our companies in networking with both realtors and home inspectors. So if you have an inspectional process in place, that's something you want to make sure you want to market that to the realtors and the home inspectors in your area. Another major stakeholder in our industry is the insurance companies. We are seeing that these insurance companies, similar to what Vermont is doing, they're requiring that the oil tanks be inspected on a regular basis. So they have an inspection form that goes out that they require that the technicians or the drivers fill out, just making sure that everything is up to code, up to snuff, and so again, I think that's something that we're seeing that a lot of the insurance companies are doing, either for all the tanks or at the very minimum for any new tank that you deliver to, you're required to do some form of a visual inspection on that above ground tank. The other thing I just wanted to share with you, and if there's one takeaway that you have from this whole presentation, I hope it's this. I see this out in the marketplace a lot, where oil marketers, oil companies will market tank insurance programs on their website or in their service contract. That's something I would advise that you do not do, because you are not an insurance company, and so you might just want to change the wording, call it a tank warranty program rather than a tank insurance program, because again, you can't be selling tank insurance, any type of insurance, if you're not an insurance company. So that's just something to kind of consider. The other thing too is if you do have kind of an in-house program, you might want to consider, just taking a look at what type of language you are using. You want to make sure that you are not driving or making the homeowner wait for the oil tank to leak in order for you to replace it, because that could really come back to bite you. And we have seen that happen time and time again with companies that have in-house programs where they're telling the homeowner that, yeah, we'll cover your tank, we'll replace it, but oil has to be on the ground for us to replace that tank. So it seems kind of crazy, but unfortunately there are companies out there that are doing that, and they have this written into language in their service contract or on their website. So just two things to think about. Again, don't call it tank insurance. Change the wording on that, and make sure that you are not making the homeowner wait for that tank to leak in order to replace it. So lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about the impact. I kind of talked about this on the front end. Obviously the oil tank is the Achilles heel in our industry, and the natural gas companies like to capitalize on that. They like to, take advantage of showing, those pictures I had on the front end of these ugly, rotten looking oil tanks, and really trying to convince the homeowner to switch to natural gas. So that's why I think this is an issue that we as an industry really need to address. And so we do see, unfortunately, a lot of natural gas conversions and the various markets that we're in, and I think a lot of it has to do with with the oil tank being an issue. So if we can address this issue, I think that we can really slow down these natural gas conversions. So I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Sean. He's going to talk about some great techniques you can use to manage your tank portfolio using marketing and technology. Sean?
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it. So yeah, I'll just kind of roll right into it. And what Jerry was speaking about there, you know, the tank itself is an industry issue, and the major concerns that it creates are liability concerns, insurance premiums, and customer migration, as he had mentioned. And what they really stem from is that 7% that he spoke about early in the presentation. So the way to combat that is to eliminate your 7%, and every marketer has that. So how do we suggest you do that? We suggest you do that by owning the tank, and not literally because we know that the homeowner does, but in the sense that, you know, creating some accountability for yourself as it relates to the tank, which a lot of folks do a great job of tank inspections, but you're also at the mercy of techs and communication being perfect, et cetera, which is why we're kind of left with the 7%. So we have a couple suggestions that we're going to talk through as it relates to how you can own the tank through marketing, through branding, but also how you can own the tank through having a better internal process that we'll talk about as well. So the first thing you see here is what we call a tank sticker, and this does a great job of getting your brand in front of the customer and tied directly to the oil tank. So it allows you to you know, keep your inspection history, and again, putting your brand there, whether there's a sale of the home or whatever it may be. It's you want them to call you, and that's the idea behind putting that sticker on the tank. The next scenario is some marketing that goes out and using the tank as an impetus for the homeowner to want to get a cleaning or want to get service completed. So what you see here is what we call a dentist style tune-up postcard, with the idea being you schedule that tune-up based on when they got it the year prior. So kind of takes it off the plate of the homeowner. But in this instance, we're using the tank as, again, the impetus for you know, getting that tune-up completed. One of the things that we also found through some NORA projects that we've done is that the #1 reason that homeowners get a tune-up or a cleaning is because of the safety aspect. So that's going to tie a couple things together. One, obviously your heating system, making sure it's running efficiently and safely, but also the tank, that it's in a good place. It doesn't need to be replaced at that point in time. So making sure we're keeping an eye on it on a fairly regular basis. It's why you want to tie that in with your marketing and your tune-ups. And we, again, so to speak to the tune-up directly, when you're invoicing for these things, it should be something that if you're doing a tank inspection at the time of the tune-up, which we highly recommend, you're in the home already, you know, why not list that as a service that you're completing? Because it's a very good value add for the homeowner. And at the same time, if you do offer a level of coverage or a tank replacement payment program of some type, again, avoiding that word insurance, then this is where you should put it in front of the homeowner and bill accordingly. It should be something that you get revenue from, and you can make some money off of the tank programs that you provide, whether it's in-house, which, you know, as a third-party vendor, we don't recommend. We recommend you leave it to the experts like us to take care of the process and make you a buck at the same time. So if you're going to include it in the tune-up, then clearly you would include it in your service plan. But some companies, you know, don't take that approach, and some people choose to avoid the language of an oil tank in the service plan. Again, when Jerry was talking, and just, you know, the previous conversations we've had, it's something you don't want to avoid. The only way to be proactive with the tank is, again, using the verbiage here to own the tank. So include it, the language in your plan, offer the homeowner some type of incentive through a program to get it replaced, whether it's in good condition or requires a replacement. But the service plan is such a great tool to do that, because homeowners already believe the boiler's covered, the water heater's covered. Well, you should be including the tank because in their mind, it likely is a part of it, again, just from their mindset. But it's important to include the tank, do your inspection, use marketing to communicate that to the homeowner. So another way of owning the tank is to, again, is to really get into inspecting, taking photos, cataloging what you've done, and keeping a history of your communication with the homeowner. What you see here is our example of a tank inspection certificate, which helps communicate what the tank was, what it looked like, and what it tested at the time of the actual cleaning and inspection. And if there's issues, it's going to be found on there. If the tank was in good shape at the point in time that you inspected it, that's going to be on there as well. It's a professional document that just helps convey the message that you did an oil tank inspection and here's where your tank stands today. From a photo standpoint, you know, the technology that exists out there, and this is an example of what we call our dashboard, it helps you catalog different follow-up items and really puts a focus again on tank or tank related items. So, you know, whether it's high risk, whether it's feed line upgrades, tanks that have been replaced, photo reviews, letters that have been sent, we're going to help you document how to communicate to the homeowner and what you did communicate to the homeowner and where every single tank of yours stands. So you can drill in, and this is where it really gives you the ability to manage your entire tank portfolio. So some folks probably have something in place, but it'd be hard pressed to say that you can manage 100% of your tank portfolio without something built specifically for that. And that's kind of what TankSure is all about, in addition to the other things that Jerry had mentioned earlier with ultrasonic testing, etc. But this is an example where it allows you to review the photos that have been taken for each tank, any comments that the tech made through their mobile inspection or hard copy inspection, whichever way you prefer. But from a mobile standpoint, obviously the photo aspects get added in that way. We can track whether or not it's okay, whether or not the tank's been replaced, and what communication you've made with the homeowner as it relates to a potential letter or again, whatever type of communication you've had, or put it on stop delivery, etc. And when we speak about that letter, again, Jerry talked about this earlier, but this just gives you the visual. It's important to communicate anything that you're recommending to the homeowner and to document that communication. So this letter is an example. You know, not every tank needs to be replaced right when you see it and requires immediate replacement or stop delivery. There's a number of tanks that you might recommend replacement, but it doesn't mean it has to be done at that point in time. So if you can document that you've communicated it, we have letters for any scenario you can think of as a part of the program, and it's ultimately to help protect yourself and get the homeowner to be proactive with their oil tank replacement, because that's the biggest thing here. And it's probably something we haven't mentioned enough, is the word proactive, especially when it comes to oil tanks. There's nothing more important. So a recap of our what we can offer is a photo upload feature following EPA and API guidelines through the ultrasonic testing and patented inspection process. We give you the ability to manage 100% of your tank portfolio, and we can help you document and track your homeowner communications through the system, tied directly to, again, the oil tank. And how we think we can do that and provide this potential solution for you would be a 60-day free trial, which would include the training, equipment, the system. You get everything, and it allows you that will show you the 7% that exist in your portfolio just from doing the free trial. And we think it can be very effective. And if it's something you are interested in, you know, here's our contact information, whether it's about our program or not, anything tank related. You're more than welcome to reach out to both Jerry or myself. Again, our contact information is there. We really appreciate your time today and hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Have a great, safe day. Thank you.